the different models we have here. And what I presented last time was a deployment strategy that makes Azure powerful, and that is that we actually split the provisioning from the deployment and from the hosting. And you can even have multiple people, disciplines, managing the separate layers, the separate tiers. So your developers can deploy without having to know anything about how it's been provisioned, or don't have access to the keys or the credentials, and you can all separate that very well. The developers actually don't have to enter the portal and configure the hosting. That could be done by system engineers. Of course you can mix and match, but this is very powerful. And this is also what we're going to look into today, because last time I explained you have two ways of handling this. You can provision once, then deploy every time you have a new version and manage your hosting separately. But there's also a model you could provision every time you want to deploy, so you can repeat the first two steps. And for what we found to be the best way to work with this is to provision the initial infrastructure at one time and then repeat provisioning Sitecore over that. And that's what we will look into today. This is an example of deployment, and it shows you the separate parts, the separate instances or services that are required to run Sitecore. And you see that with the ARM templates that we have downloaded from Sitecore, everything you see here will be provisioned at once, and the connections, the dependency between the different resources will also be configured in one go. And that's beautiful, but that also poses a problem, that because you don't want to repeat provisioning your database once you're in production, but you do want to provision your staging slots. So that's the case we have. ARM templates, for those who do not yet know them, it's the default Azure standard using JSON to provision new Sitecore, Azure resources, and Sitecore uses this as well. Sitecore delivers you some ARM templates as a starting point for your own provisioning, and it enables you to define your whole environment, different environments you have for different customers, or you can share them between customers, what we are trying to do, and define them in one template. As I said, you can do it for initial provisioning or for continuous deployment, and where I last time showed the initial provisioning, I will now show the continuous deployment. ARM templates use web deploy packages, Sitecore web deploy packages to be more precise, and that's just a regular web root file, file list, and backpack packages to provision your file set and your databases. So what's next? After this quick introduction and last time, well, I want to work towards an ultimate continuous deployment setup. And if we want to get an ultimate continuous deployment setup, we have to take some steps. We're going to look in what do we need for a good continuous integration setup, how can we edit and extend the provided ARM templates, and then I mean those provided by Sitecore. And what are the pitfalls or maybe black holes in the blue-green provisioning? And I think by the end of today you will know what I mean by black hole. So, how to streamline your continuous deployment? Well, I've made a small wish list. Excuse me. I want to clean install every deployment based on a vanilla Sitecore install. So every time I deploy, I want a clean environment, no files from previous deployments. Because if I remove a config file, I don't want it to be on the new deployment as well, and deploying via web deploy regularly only places new files. So I want a clean install. That also means I do not build up any errors or any issues that appear in your environment. I want to keep the database content, so after I deploy once and our customer starts working within the environment, I don't want to override the database content. I don't want to disturb the live site, with the deployment process. You all can see where this is going. I want a staging slot. And I want the option to roll back easily. It should be, in the end, a repeatable process that's fully automated. So, okay, Sitecore delivers you some ARM templates, but what is actually missing in those if you have this kind of wish list? First of all, you cannot re-provision an environment. You can do it once, and you can deploy to that environment very well, but you won't be able to delete files that are on there. Of course, there are some tricks, and you can FTP to the environment, and you can use other tricks as well to remove files, maybe from Visual Studio Team Services, but I think you should not go there. And it's not an automatic process. It doesn't provision staging slots, so I think ideally you want those within your initial script as well. And it doesn't tell you how to re-provision without overriding your database content. So if you use the default Sitecore script, it just sets up a new environment every time you run them. So if you go and take a look at what the steps, what steps are needed. First, we want to roll out the infrastructure. So no Sitecore stuff, only the infrastructure. You need a SQL Server, you need Azure Search, you need application insights, you need a Redis cache. It's all in the ARM template of Sitecore, but you don't want to install Sitecore yet, because this is something, infrastructure, you want to do only once. So if you separate it, you can do it only once, and you can repeat the other script. The next step is that we want to provision a vanilla Sitecore install into a staging slot. And we want to install databases here because we do not have an environment yet. And the third step is we're actually going to repeat this step. So it's the same script, but without the databases. And we need a different web deploy package for that. Sitecore provisions those web deploy packages for you, but they contain a database. So we're going to strip them out. And the fourth step is deploying your solution over the staging slot when you're ready. And if you do this, you have two initial steps, and these steps can be repeated over and over. And because you always deploy to the staging slot and swap afterwards, you are always deploying without disturbing any live visitors. So if I would make a schema or some images that work better than text, I think, what we do is we provision the infrastructure. Everything you see right there is created, but if you start your web application, it doesn't contain Sitecore. This is just a regular web app. Empty web app, empty databases. Second step, the vanilla Sitecore install would install Sitecore in my staging slot, leave this slot like it is, and populate the databases with default Sitecore content. Then, this is not actually needed normally, but for the demo it's easier. We swap, and you see that this slot will be empty, and then we re-provision, as I call it. And what that does is the slot that was installed with the default Azure web app now gets wiped, so it's clean again, and then Sitecore will be installed, but it doesn't install the database. So it keeps the same content. And then you are going to deploy your own code and content over that and changes in your slot, and you can warm up your application, and that's just regular Sitecore stuff. You can Azure stuff, and you can swap afterwards if you're ready. You can run warm-up scripts, you can test, you can even do performance test on the second one, but will be tricky because they're on the same hosting plan. So for the Azure system engineers over here, that will be noticeable in your performance of the live app as well, because shared resources. This slide is a slide that is created by Microsoft, on how they think we, as a Sitecore implementation partner, should provision our environment using blue-green deployment. And it's more or less the same as I told, but in a different type of slide. It uses the Sitecore web deploy packages. You can use cargo payloads. I will explain that later on. Your own code, so you have to combine those. That will create artifacts. Those web deploy packages will be deployed into a pre-production slot or staging slot, if you like. From 1 to 7 are the steps required to deploy. Actually, there's one more thing in this slide that I didn't mention yet. If you deploy into a staging slot, you would still share the same database. So if you put on new content, your production slot will also be updated with new Sitecore content. And to prevent that from happening, you could actually duplicate the web database. That's a small Azure command. It's really, really fast. And that's why on the right, top right, it says freeze. If you agree on a content freeze with your content editors, you would be able to duplicate the web database and tie the connection string of the staging slot to the second database. And then you could install in your master, which is still shared, so that's why you shouldn't have content editors working on that environment, because if they publish, it would go to the current environment, but that will be the old environment and it will be gone when you swap. So you'll have a second database, you install your content via Unicorn, for example, on your master, you publish to the new web database, and then you have a full version of the old and of the new site versions running next to each other with their own web database. And the moment you swap, the connection strings are transferred as well, so the databases stick to the same environment as they are right now, and you will be live instantly. The old slot will still be there with the old database, and you can, if something goes wrong, you can swap back and you still have your old published content. So this is an ideal scenario of blue-green deploying. It is a bit more complex though, because your connection string have to be separated from your configuration and have to be put in configuration slot settings. But it's, I think it's a very nice schema. There's one pitfall over here, discovered by one of the guys we discussed this with, and that is your indexing. Azure Search indexes your master database, so the moment you put on new content in your master database, your index will be updated. The old in the database, but that's something we're still figuring out. But I think it's good to mention though. So to be able to do this, we're going to customize the ARM templates delivered by Sitecore. We're going to split the infrastructure and the MS deploy part. We will use output parameters from ARM, because if we have 2 or more templates, they have the same parameters, and in the second script I need to know what the first script created in terms of passwords and such. So we need to transfer them from one script to the other. We're going to add staging slots, and we're going to upgrade the minimum SKUs because they're configured. Sitecore uses the basic SKU, and that's too small. You can't use staging slots in that. And the last step, which is quite a big one, is we're going to create databaseless Sitecore web deploy packages. The web deploy packages delivered by Sitecore, SCWDPs, have to be stripped from their databases to reprovision without overwriting the database. So first I'm going to demo how to split the files. I'm not going to show it extensively because you can download the scripts from my GitHub account, afterwards. The exact same scripts I've tested and used to provision, so you can do it yourself. And you can cherry pick what you like from them. But I will show what I have changed. We'll start with the single setup. Sitecore delivers an XP0 single setup, which is a single server instance, and delivers an XP full setup, which is for XP1 to XP5, and it contains content management, delivery, processing, and reporting. Sitecore does not provide what I call the double setup with content management and content delivery. I hope it now still works. Yeah, okay, thank you. It does not provide a double setup with content management and content delivery split, but the reporting and the processing combined on the content management. So I created that myself, and I also share this script. But I will start with single because that's the easiest one. As you can see, I've created now 3 PowerShell scripts that just start the right ARM template. And I will dive into the ARM template first. I use Visual Studio Code to edit my JSON files. I think it's the easiest tool for doing that because you can easily fold down sections yeah, it really works well with JSON, I think. These are the 2 templates. Going to show you them in this mode. So ARM templates do take a while to get the hang of them, understand how they are built up, but actually it's not all that difficult. You need to just get acquainted with how they're built up, and then you can edit them manually as well. You can generate them from your portal, but in this case I just manually edited them. You first have some variables that are populated with parameters. The parameters are over here, and you can actually send the parameter from PowerShell to the ARM template. So in a separate file I have all the parameter settings, and I will populate them in the PowerShell script. We'll not go over all of them because it's quite a long list. But then you get to the resources, and the resources just explain what they are going to create. They will create a server farm, which is a server farm is sometimes the new terms, the marketing terms of Azure are different from the actual scripts used because it's the initial name and it wasn't changed over time. So sites is actually web apps, which started out as sites, and server farm actually is referring to a hosting plan, how they call it right now. But this will all become familiar when you start doing it. And what you see is that in the infra, I'm not going to update it right now, in the infra script I kept the server farm. So this is the edited ARM template from Sitecore. I kept the server farm, the sites, but then I added some things. You can add app settings over here, and here I added a slot. For some reason it doesn't recognize slot, but it works perfectly well. And be sure that every section contains a dependency within the ARM template. When you're going to edit the ARM template, you should edit the dependencies as well. You should strip out what you do not use. So I've created a slot, and the slot is called single staging. Why it is called single staging, and my site is called, where it is. Okay, it'll come further on, but my site is also called staging. So the staging slot URL will actually have, which you will see a few moments later, will actually be something like single staging, but the single staging slot, as mentioned right here, will also show up as a resource in Azure. And when you do not name your staging slot other than staging, and you have like multiple hosting plans, you will see a whole list of staging, and you can distinguish them from each other anymore. So I've created a staging slot that's called single staging, and that's for my single setup. And it's just the slot configuration. There's no deploy in it whatsoever. So without this setting, you will not have Sitecore, but that's on purpose. Then you have the SQL Server, and I left this all exactly the same as Sitecore did. Your databases just creates the database only, no content in it. The web database, and finally the search service, which is Azure Search, Application Insights, and this normally is the end of your ARM template. I stripped out MS Deploy, which is in the other template I will show in a minute. Then what you can do, which is very powerful, you can add a section outputs, and you can put in any variable. You can just copy them one on one, or you can also calculate new values. So for the second script that doesn't create the database, I have to connect to the database to populate it. So I need to know the full qualified name. And that's what I copied here into a variable called dbServer fully qualified. And that's some parameter I'm going to use in the second script. We need that. And then there's all the list of the output parameters. If you run this and you name your deployment, you can go to Azure and you go to your resource group after your deployment, of course, and there's deployments, and it'll just show you the deployment you did, and you can click into it and you're going to see all the output parameters you've used here. So this is very handy. It's you put it in your script and it'll appear here, and you can pick up those values in any other automated script after that. So this will be stored persistently as long as the resource group keeps existing. Then moving on to the second script, starts with the same variables, a little less parameters because I stripped out what I didn't use anymore. And what you see here, same site reference, same slot reference, but only the reference, depending on each other, and then the MS deploy. Originally, this part is also in the first template, so this is what I stripped out of it. And what I changed, and this is quite some work, but what I changed is the connection strings normally are built up within here, and now I refer to an earlier deployment called Sitecore Infra. To an earlier deployment, and I refer to the output value I've shown you, and then to the fully qualified value. So you see here that you can change the default connection string to referring to the output parameters. And by doing this, I have split it and can first run the infra script which will provision the infrastructure only, and then I can deploy Sitecore. The infra is something we're going to run once only. The MS deploy is also run once, but also used for reprovisioning. It's the same ARM template, only the parameters are different, and I will show you that. First of all, I have the parameter template for the infra. It's stripped out only the things we need. Of course, these are all demo credentials, so will not be up and running anymore after this presentation, but I want to show you how it works, so I needed to include those. It contains the connection strings, the SQL Server, but doesn't contain any Sitecore stuff. This is run once. And then I have the MS deploy parameter file. And this also contains the link to the web deploy package. And if you're going to look at the name, this is the original name by Sitecore, ending on single SCWDP. The last one, the redeploy parameter file, is exactly the same despite one thing, and that's the NoDB extension. I duplicated the SCWDP package and stripped the database from it, and I'm pointing to that download to reprovision. So what I'm doing from my PowerShell is first I run the infra, then I run msdeploy, and then I run the redeploy, which is exactly the same ARM template, but with a different input parameter for the Sitecore web deploy package. So that's all. I'll put there's a link on the end of the slides, and you can have the slides and you can have the ARM scripts, but then you see what I did and what the difference with the Sitecore template is. Okay, so let's continue. Because I mentioned that we need a databaseless web deploy package. You can download the one containing the vanilla database, but you have to strip the database out of the web deploy package. Yes. And you can do that using msdeploy actually, and this is something that wasn't mentioned. I learned it while working on it and speaking to people from Microsoft and Sitecore, so I think it's a very valuable step to know how you do this. msdeploy can be used to deploy to a server or to any other target, but you can also deploy from a zip archive to another zip archive. You can actually deploy a source to a new source and doing some operations on it. And the msdeploy tool has the ability to skip the DB full SQL and DB DAC4FX parameters. And this will strip out your database of the Sitecore web deploy package. And what you have to do is, within that SCWDP is a parameters.xml file, and it contains all the parameters it needs. And you have to take that file out of it, look at all the input parameters, and then you're going to invoke msdeploy with those skip object name, DB full SQL and DB DACFX, and it will strip them out. But you also need all the additional parameters that are required by this package. And for the fun of it, I just put it on the screen. That's this little command. And it contains all the credentials as well. And again, fake credentials. And it contains all this. And it would be different per environment, per customer, per role. And it's very bad. So we can do better than that. Actually, first of all, real config values doesn't have to be in the package, because we're going to populate them with the ARM template anyway. So it can be fake values. And secondly, we don't want them there because we want to reuse the package. You only want once per customer. For security reasons, you don't. This is an example script. Actually works on my GitHub as well. And what that does is it opens up the parameter file, loops through all the content, all the parameters, and then on the right it puts just default stuff in the parameter file, invokes them, creates the package on the far right, and then you have a databaseless web deploy package. I will now show that to you. So I have the script, stripdb. Going to open it. That's the script I showed in my slide, and it will populate everything with temp value except from the license XML, which is also replaced, and the IP addresses, because it needs to be an IP address, and then it invokes it. When you run this, I'll get this one. This is the original package by Sitecore, and it's quite easy to understand what is going on. I have a content folder over here, and it contains my web root, the vanilla web root we know all from Sitecore. When I go back to the root of the package, I see SQL script and DACPACs containing the format and the data of my database. When I have run this PowerShell script, I end up with this package. and it doesn't contain any database style anymore. So when we run the exact same ms deploy script as we did before, it will now reprovision over the slot, keeping the database intact. And that's exactly what we want. So and I'm going to continue my presentation, and then I have to, is it still working? Okay. Yes, so deploy time. How we are going to deploy. We want to, first of all, reprovision, always reprovision, using the MS Deploy ARM and the databaseless package. And then we are going to deploy to the staging slot, using Visual Studio, for example. Then you go to test and warm up your site, do everything you want, and afterwards you can swap. Within Visual Studio, which I find quite easy to use, Visual Studio Team Services, you can just connect to a subscription, to an app service, and you can select deploy to slot, and then it deploys into your slot you've created with the ARM template. One more thing, and that's cargo payload packages. I'm not sure if you already heard about it, but within Azure, you actually do not want to use XML transforms anymore to make your different servers having different configurations, because you want one artifact deployed to all environments at once. So it's better to use cargo payload packages. For the sake of time and talking way too long, I'm not going into this, but you should know they exist. Sitecore uses cargo payload packages as well to create the different roles. The full database, the full setup has the content management, delivery, reporting, and processing roles, and that's 4 different Sitecore web deploy packages. And the difference is created by cargo payload packages, which are also a kind of XML transforms placed on top of the default Sitecore installation. And you can use the Azure Toolkit from Sitecore to create those. And you can add your own configuration to those packages to get a base installation. And for example, you can say, okay, let's put Unicorn, which I always use, in my SCWDP packages in the exact configuration I want. And you can go to the blog of Bas Leijten, because he did quite an interesting article about how this works and how you could use it in your environment. And you can even use this on your on-premises environment as well. It's actually not tied to deploying to Azure, but it's aimed at Azure, however. So, what are the tips, tricks, and pitfalls, and what could go wrong? Because there's still some things, I already mentioned them, but the first one I didn't mention yet, and that is, please secure your environment. If you just go and upload your web deploy packages to a blob storage, everyone could download them. It's not allowed by Sitecore, because you can't distribute the Sitecore code and DLL assemblies. But you also, if there might end up any credentials end up in your packages, you do not want people to be able to download them. So you can rather easily use shared access signatures. One slide of that added to the presentation in a second. And you should use IP security to your test and acceptance environment. What I did is the scripts from Sitecore contain IP security for your content management role in the full setup, and I just copied these settings to the single setup, because the single setup is often used in our case for the test and the acceptance environment, and you can just immediately provision your IP security within the same script as well. So it's already configured when you roll out. And one thing not mentioned in my script or blog that will be published is the key vault. I think it's a whole different topic, but you can use Azure Key Vault to store your keys and passwords. And with that, your PowerShell scripts will obtain the credentials from Key Vault and use them on the go. So they will not be stored anywhere else than in the Key Vault, and they will not be accessed by developers, only by, for example, the system engineer. So you can get a good separation of concern over there. STAS is something you can do to secure your blob downloads, and it's very easy. You can go to shared access signature within your container configuration, and you select the things you want. You actually only have to select object and read to be able to download, and then you create a time that you want this to be available, generate the key, and you get a query parameter list, and you just concatenate them to the download URL, and it works, and it's secured. So only if you have these parameters, which is a very long string, a very long token, then you can download and use this web deploy package. So important to do. If you want to troubleshoot, you can add SCM to the URL, which you also will see when you go through the portal. And you can actually browse through your files. You can edit them, which you should not do, but for debugging purposes it could be useful. You can execute PowerShell scripts on your machine, so you don't have to redeploy all over again. But once again, actually only use this to view what's going on, or FTP into your web app, which also can be done. That can be very useful for troubleshooting. The pitfalls are the event queue issue. When you are deploying blue-green, you have two content management servers, and both the content management servers will put events in your event queue. That can cause issues. So there's a trick, and I've written a blog about this a few months back, also included a link what you can do to prevent this. Indexing is something I already mentioned. So your Azure Search will start re-indexing based upon the new content. So if you use two databases on the web, please bear in mind that your indexes will be updated already. And the content stop is something I don't like in the blue-green scenario. Still, I don't have an answer for that, but the idea behind continuous deployments is that you can deploy like 3 times a day, and if you have to call your content editors 3 times a day, it would be quite disturbing. So I'm going to round up. One more thing, Sitecore will come with an ARM update very quickly. It's not published yet, but it will contain several things I have shown, but it will also contain things I did not do yet. It will contain nested templates, which I didn't do, but it cuts down the template, the ARM template, in even smaller pieces and uses nesting to run them all. So that's a very powerful and good thing. It also splits infra and application, so that's maybe a little bit different than I have done it, but that's more or less the same. And it will contain module support via add-ons. So WFM, Web Forms for Marketers, is done via an add-on, and it will be supported by them. Also very powerful. But the staging and the database-less reprovisioning, which is very, I think it's required to do blue-green, is not in there yet. May come in a future update, I don't know. But therefore you can check my repository. And lastly, always use them as a boilerplate, so don't use them for production right away. Because I will share these slides, here you can find some blog posts. Mention again, the first one about Azure is deprecated because it's about cloud services. There's an introduction on Azure Web Apps, a more comprehensive introduction, and this presentation will also be blogged about, I hope, in a few days. And then I have have some tips about automating via PowerShell and the event queue issue I mentioned. So that's handy. This is the link of the ARM templates and script I've shown you, which you can already download. They're already live. And please keep an eye on my blog, because I will share what I've told you today. And that's it. That was my presentation.
So you think that we would like to share with our star speaker?
I'm almost losing it again.
It's the day of the king today.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. King's Day in the Netherlands.
Initially, I thought that this will be about continuous integration, but in fact, when I was writing this small presentation, I realized that it is about automating delivery. It's not about continuous integration. We're still on the way for continuous integration. Initially, our starting point, which was pretty long time ago, I think you see here, it was really nice process. Somebody develops something, then handles this code compiled on his own machine to person who deploys, and this person will use RDP or FTP to deliver these files and hope that everything goes well. Not really good, but it was like this. So finally, we came out with a solution to use a TeamCity as a build server, but actually we're not really tied into it, but you can use any build server out there, like Jenkins, Cruise Control, Visual Studio for Team Services, and it will work. It will just work. So normal process is like developers will contribute to source control their code, and then build server will either build and deploy, prepare a releasable package, and deliver, and then will deliver it on your wish to the target service. But with Sitecore, we have another challenge that we need to deliver some logical items, like what is called items actually in the databases. So you can use Unicorn for this, you can use TDS for this, but TDS costs much, and when we started this automation, Unicorn was not major, so we decided to go our way and created small VCF service which will deliver zip or update packages to target servers and deploy them using native Sitecore code to deliver. So the developer develops his codes and he creates a package and also puts it in the source control. I shall note that this process is usable only if you have a shared database. So all developers are using the same database in during development. If you use own databases, then it's preferable to use Unicorn or TDS. So, and steps are actually the delivery is using two steps for actually the delivery consists of two steps. First, we need to prepare a release package, then we need to deploy it. So first of all, release package preparation. First step of this process is install NuGet packages, then MS Build will create a deployable package along with a command file which can be used to execute this package. After that, we will run, if there is tests, and we can run tests on it. And final step of preparing release package is analysis of web config using CSA, which is based on OWASP to check your web config for security. Deployment is slightly bigger because it involves more steps. It also needs access to source control at this moment to get those packages to deliver. So first start, it will do a configuration transformations because when you're delivering a release package, you will need different configurations for roles you are delivering, like content delivery server will have access to web and code database, but don't need access to master database. There can be different indexes set up, whatever you need. Everything can be configured with config transformations based on default Visual Studio config transformations and Slow Cheetah for additional configurations. Then MS Build will execute a special Sitecore delivery step. It's actually a set of MS Build targets which downloads web config from a target server, inject their VCF configuration, uploads this web config along with a color CI daily for our VCF service to work, and then uploads our zip packages and installs them on target server. Next, separate step, publish an app offline to stop our application from serving content to end users. And along with publishing app offline, we are stopping monitoring, if any, like uptrends, New Relic synthetics, whatever. Also, there is an additional target to inform New Relic about deployment. The main tool we are using for monitoring our applications is New Relic. So deployments can be traced also there. Then separate step, again with MS build, is cleaning up of target application, like removing all stale files in bin folder, for example, or media caching can be removed, or views can be removed if you need this. Everything is configurable. Then, since MS build and MS deploy strangely uses different parameters, we need to prepare parameters, and for example, there is a wonderful parameter, skip extra files on server, which allows us to either deployment fires up with a CMD file produced by MS build and prepare during preparation of release package. Then, again, MS deploy delivers our config files from config transformation step. Then we will remove application offline to serve our application to users. And curl will visit first page, home page of our application to heat it up. Then wget will preheat our application, visiting several pages up to whatever deep link you want. Normally it is up to 2 levels of links, but it can be configured to any level you wish to. And finally, there is a set of deployment checks, which also uses MS build to check our application. It consists of several checks, like checking robots.txt, if it's there, if it's valid, if it doesn't deny content indexing, because there was issues with somebody checked in robots.txt with denial of all indexing, and then, as you can imagine, the customer will not like it. Also, we run a web page test analysis to analyze how application is performing after our deployment, and we check our application for broken links also. So that's it. Really short and fast. Do you have questions?
Any questions, anybody, to our biggest star and a guy from few words? Anyone, or afterwards, probably?
I don't know what happened, but hopefully that will, well, we are okay now. So, something about score. If you remember last meetup, there was a nice presentation about Sitecore SXA, and there was a question, what about score? Is it like similar or it's different? So I just wanted to explain you a bit about score. I will be using this presentation just for a couple of minutes because I borrowed it from the sales department. And I just needed something on the background while I'm explaining and talking. So score, well, basically score is the development framework for Sitecore. But actually it's, it's a bit boring abbreviation, well, not abbreviation, but description, because score is actually much more than that. Well, if we're talking about score, what is score? Actually, it's a quite big, extension for a Sitecore, especially about the pages. Score was built to extend the page editor or experience editor and bring it to a new level. Well, actually, that's a pretty basic stuff about Sitecore. And Score, wanted to decide a couple of things, especially for enterprise clients, because, well, normally you can use Score to build just a simple website, to design and web pages, just a couple of them, but actually it's not, the real thing. The real thing is that when you're trying to use it, you normally use it like a big client, and you have a lot of probably similar websites. And so Score helps here to reduce delivery costs and everything. Yeah, it's about sales, so you can tell. And there are two main audiences for Score users. Well, the main one is content editors. So you will see it later, because like I said, it's just a few pages here. But you will see later that using Score is much better for content editors, because the main idea of Score is to make everything page-driven. So for content editors, you do not even need to go to the content tree at all while you're building your website. So you can the idea is to make everything through the page editor or experience editor, and not to have a dependency back to the development team, because every communication, well, it's like I said, it's not about lower costs and about speeding up the development itself. So as soon as the development is finished and the content editors get their solution, they can start building right away, and they don't need to go to the development team and tell, oh, come on, just add me a little checkbox there, or could you please add another image to this layout? No, nothing like this. And another thing, yeah, of course, it's about the development. So Sitecore plus Score is actually not a big difference for developer, because if you, for example, you know how to build a simple rendering using Sitecore, then you can work with Score. No problems here. Well, Score itself, doesn't really work with the third-party components. But if you can use, if you want to use them, you can use them. No problem here. And, Score, basically, by default, it provides, I think, more than 100 visual components by default. But actually, it's not only about visual components at all. On the background, again, for using this, to follow this approach to do everything for page editors, for content editors, sorry, that would require a lot of backend work, like about data sources, about visual components, about snippets, which are actually renderings. I will show them later. And this means that, without that, there are also some components which are not visual. Well, one example is XML sitemap. which is actually a bit like extension for Score and Sitecore. You can also use that, and all of that, well, makes it, okay, well, pretty good for developers and for content editors. Well, just a few words about how actually, not the development, but a project starts, and how people from BrainJox, well, the BrainJox is actually a company who develops the Score. How BrainJox and Score work with different companies. Well, normally, like I said, it's an enterprise company. And some examples. So these are like clients. You probably don't know all of them. Well, Heinz is pretty famous. P&G stands for Procter & Gamble. Well, Honeywell is also a big client, but I don't think that's pretty familiar here in Belarus. So actually, what's happening where a client like a P&G comes to BrainJox and they say that we want to use your Score with Sitecore. Well, basically it means that Score, BrainJox can also provide a development team, architecture review and everything, but they can also do a training for P&G developers or like with third-party company, and to learn them how to work with Score, and then can do it on their own. And the idea here is to build some, a generic solution, because even big companies, they still have, they always have some not problems, but features like an external authentication system, maybe like a connection to a review service or anything. So it's always about customization as well. So as long as the base Score functionality is pretty flexible, but anyway, there is also some kind of customization for, I think, for pretty every client. And that's probably it. Well, and one more point that Score is pretty, like I said, it's pretty really documented. So for developers, it's okay to work with it. So I think that's all about boring stuff. Let's look at it. And yeah, comparing to Rob and Anton, I will probably have a lot of pictures and front end. So first of all, I would like to show you this. This website. It's built based on Score version 0.5. Version 0.5 was released 2 months ago, and so this is like a demo site. But anyway, it was built using Score, like a basic Score, no customizations at all. So what I can see here, well, first of all, maybe some header and with some menus, flyout menus, and see if they are different, like this one and this one. I have a carousel, and each carousel has a different design, like 3 columns and everything, like images. Another carousel, one more type of design, some other sections, and the header. So it's pretty basic. If I take a look at the, for example, shop, there is so there's like a search page with some products, and if there's some filters with pictures and everything. If I go for a search, the search is here, and if I type like Italy, I don't know, white wine. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I have like a match. Well, by default, all Score components and everything, it goes like with a responsive design like this. So you don't need to do anything about it. So it's out of the box. So yeah, if there is another page like this one. So you see, the site just uses a different components. They're not really complicated, but there are a lot of them, and they are all different. So let's switch to the content editor, and we'll see what actually score is on the background. Well, not the background actually, but in the experience editor. Okay. Well, actually, that's default. Well, some kind of a default content tree used by Score and on Score projects. But actually, it's up to you. If you don't like this tree, you can change it. If you're because everything based on the rules. And if, for example, you don't like the way how BrainJogs, how Score is working with as a solution, with the development teams, you can use Habitat, for example, if you want to. No problems. You can change the structure of the tree, like I said. No problems at all. And the Score has its own vision of an opinion about this, but nobody will force you to. You are not forced to work with this tree only. So this is probably not so nice. But if I switch to Experience Editor, so the idea here is to, if for example you have a lot of possibilities for a lot of things to provide for developers, for content editors, then probably you should not follow the approach when you're building a lot of sub-layouts or a lot of renderings with the fixed positions and everything. You should start with the atomic design. What this means, that if you build something, you don't need to think about a position or about what content is going to be there. Do I need to think about it? No, you don't need to think about it. So, for example, here is the home page. Well, first of all, it's a header, and you see a header. Actually, it's not there. I mean, it's just a link there, because header is like a separate part. It's called snippet. That will be later, but it's not edited here on this page, because this home page contains only that is relevant for a home page. So these are structure which represent the whole thing. So if I scroll down, this is actually my carousel. It's slide number 1, 2, and 3, and some other stuff below. So the thing is about this, if I want, for example, to add another thing, so what I do, no, probably that's a different thing. No. Yeah. Oh, come on. Oh, yeah, here we go. So there is a component called carousel pane, and you can see only one here because, obviously that is handled using the placeholder settings. And what if the content editor wants to create a new page? Well, not a new page, a new slide for example, for this homepage. So what I did, I added new rendering called carousel pane, and then I wanted to create a new content. Here we have like 4 different folders, different color. I will talk about them a bit later. And we have few options. We can choose already created data source, or we can create a new one. I'll create a new one and call it carousel pane 6. And what it does, it adds a new rendering to, obviously that's a pretty familiar thing. That will be a new rendering, and it will be on the page. And for example, well, it's blank by default, of course. I can add an image here. I can select a color for a background or a font color, like this. Or I can just start creating something similar here on the background. So what I do here, I add another component. Here I have a lot much more flexibility. For example, I will go with something like this, for example, wide left and the right side. So Score creates these two types of components. Well, another component. And for example, if I want to, to work with another component, I want to change this. For example, I want to move this bottle to this location. I can do that. And well, that actually Sitecore doesn't support out of the box. What if I want to, to work with this component? I don't want it to, it's because the bottle is pretty big, well, comparing to the whole thing. And what if I want to put it to remove it for small devices, for tablets, for example? I can do it here. Everything, like I said, everything is responsive, and you don't need to think about it. I can also, for example, put it here. Yeah, another thing, what if I decided to change, oh, sorry, that will be a different thing. What if I decided to swap columns or create a new thing about this? So I can do this. And Score will make this thing, well, actually it's equal now, but you don't see it. Yeah, I will change it like this. Yeah, again, this. I will be a different example for this. So if we're talking about atomic design, and all components are here by like a small blocks of components, and I can build a whole big thing about this. What if we just move a bit further with this? What if we think about the whole thing? And what if I want to? Yeah, I will go to the site header as a different component. No, I will leave. I don't want to save it. So here, this is our header. And as you see, it's pretty similar thing. Oh, it's just another rendering with a whole bunch of components, and but it's edited like a different location. Why? Score supports modifying standard values. Of course, you can, while you're creating your page, you can go to the standard values and put a lot of things to the standard values. So it means that your headers and footers will be then delivered to all the items based on the template. But it's a different thing here. If you, for example, save it, first thing is that you would have this lot of stuff on the top. And for example, if your page is like you have just a small piece of text and nothing more, just a small image, like a new, really short intertext, you would have like a huge header, then your small component, and then a huge footer again, which is not really user-friendly. So, and one more thing about this, if you have a lot of stuff and you change it for header, that will be like disconnected from your standard values, obviously. And it means that you have your local version of it, which is not good at all. Because if you want to change something for the whole thing, you need to go and find your like disconnected layout renderings. So this header is actually, we can do everything with it, like with a normal component. For example, I want to add another. No, I want to add. Oh my God. Let it be. No, this should be that one. Yeah, I still have a couple of different menus here, and what I want to, for example, I can create a new flyout menu, or I can do a drop-down list spider, or like different components. Some of them are, like I can create them their elements manually, or I can use something more advanced like spiders or menus with something that it's for example, if I create this one, I'm going to show you different options that we have. And here I basically have another thing here, and again some inner structure to split the area by 2. And then I want to, for example, add, not content, like navigation maybe. Yeah, I wanted to create a section menu spider, like an example. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and as a root, that will be something like discover. What it means that I added a new mega menu item. So that will be a new item on the top of the page, and that will bring me all 3 levels of items started from the discover item. Well, that's basically, it's really what Score is about. Because if you don't want to, your content editors go to content developer, go to the development team and ask them to provide, different things for different layouts. You can always do it like here, because for one thing you need to some static menu. For another, you want to use like a spider or crawler, and you want to show like 1 level or 3 levels, and everything can be done here. So if you're like, for example, you're not happy with the location, you can change it. Like this. Well, and basically that's it. You can also, for example, if you're not happy, like I said, there will be an example about this. If you're not happy with how it looks like, then you can split it into 3. Not sure. Yeah. So now we have the 3 columns here. So everything is about flexibility here. And if we're talking about snippets again, the whole thing here is a snippet, and it is stored in a different location. Here, I'm not sure if you can see it. So it's like well, it's somewhere here. Trust me. Okay, yeah. Navigation? No, not navigation. Okay, yeah. So it's another piece of thing. Why it's like this? Because actually, it's a bit of problem for Sitecore. If you open you have a huge page with a lot of components, a lot of renderings, with different data sources, and it's pretty problem for Sitecore to handle all of this properly. So that's why, this approach with the snippets is here. But it can be extended even more. What if, for example, I want to, I don't want to use snippets, but for some reason, for example, I want to, let me see. Well, let's start with Orangino. Okay, we have a page here, and well, it's like a page is a page, and nothing really fancy about it. But for some reason, I want to take this part, and I want to reuse it because, well, I want something like a copy. So this is like an advanced copy-paste thing. If I want to cut this part, I'm gonna click this little scissors, and that will ask me to create a snippet. And I'm gonna call it Sitecore. Okay. And what it means? It means that it creates a new snippet under the all snippets. Here it is. And yeah, also has a preview here, you know, some text, some intro text, some right stuff from the right. And for example, I wanted to reuse this, well, I can show it here. I deleted it, and then I want to add another snippet, and that will be content, and run a snippet macro. And I will pick the same snippet again. Boom. So basically, it's a way to reuse the content between you know, different pages. For example, for some page, well, so you can think about it like a pattern of content. So I cut this part, and I can paste it anywhere, and I can change the text and everything, blah blah blah, and save. And that will be a copy of this particular page, not the, you know, the snippet itself. That will be not shared. That's the difference. So this is a really flexible way for content editors to think about, well, another thing maybe just to keep in mind that if they want to reuse something, they don't need to go to the different page with a different template, think about standard values or anything. They can just cut the piece of a page, then paste it, then modify it and save, and that will do everything. So it's a pretty nice way for content editors, because it saves a lot of time and money, of course. And there's one more thing about this. Not sure if it works. For some reason it doesn't. Yeah, so just want to mention that Score provides a couple of components that are out of the box for geolocation, for YouTube videos and everything. So it's, if you, yeah, so normally you have a lot of cases when you need to use geolocation. So yeah, it's also for content editors to simplify their life. And if there are, you know, some problems with another component, you need to use something different, yes, then you should go with the customization, of course. And I want to switch to another thing about this and to tell you about, yeah, probably I told you about standard values already. Just wanted to make sure that got that page. Okay, standard values here. Just an example. So you see the standard values for a content page. It's pretty small. So just a breadcrumb here, some text and everything. So it's everything that will be, you know, creating these standard values, that will take this part. And if you change it there, all your like referenced items, they will be updated, which is like, you know, pretty the way Sitecore works. And another thing about this, it's branches. So they're pretty different comparing to the standard values, because here we can create like a whole sections of a website. For example, I don't know, this is about content page, this is about details page branch, but we can create just the whole thing, the whole website. And actually, this is a case. And I promised to tell you about these folders. These are, data sources for components that are here. So if I change, I want to change something here. For example, for this branch, I want to, I don't know, I want to do some things about it. Because let's do it with product details page. I want to change it a bit. I want to move components maybe. I want to add something like an image. And what I do, I don't know, I can cut it from here, move it here, to move title to another location like here. And I'm okay with it. I can save. And if I save, all my data sources, all components are stored here for a green folder. And if I create then something using this branch template, that will also have already resolved things like images and other data source components for this particular page. So green folder means something for this item. So currently that's for home item. There are other levels of this. I, for example, can use a red folder. Here red folder is not the right order. So content is a blue folder, and this is something that available for all pages under this tenant. So currently this is USA. And if I want to use something even more shared, like for the whole thing, for like a group of sites of tenant, then I can use a red folder. And if you probably saw it, if I want to add something here, like image button, I can do this for a red folder or for a green folder. Well, everything depends on the rules, because currently this is resolved only for these folders, but you can share it all across the website. That also saves you time, because you don't need to think about copying something. You can use the same like instance or copy of a data source. And you probably think about, what if all this flexibility about, but if I want to, for example, what if I want to put a lot of components on the page, and I want them to communicate. And for example, if I click one component, something gets changed for another component. And how it's possible without the development team? The thing is, Score has provided, since version 2.1, Score provides CCF, which stands for Component Communications Framework. And this is all about it. This is about communication between different components which are on the page. And like I said, content editors don't need to go to the development team and ask them, if I click this button, please do something with this component, like make it red, for example, I don't know. Using the CCF, which is, I probably saw a lot of things about it, but CCF is, I think it's more or less completed. So if I go to my search page, which is a good example. Well, it is a search page. Yeah, bad thing. Okay, my front end is now gone. Anyway, this is my search page, and well, if you remember, if I was typing something, that changed. Well, on the using the search box, that changed facets here. That changed also, well, the results, number of results, their availability. If there were no results for this group from 10 to $20, then it became like disabled and everything. So everything was, and one thing, if I select something here, And I also have a facet here, well, with a little red cross that I can delete it. So it's all about, communication. This part communicates with this one, and this part communicates with this part, which is probably, well, you can always add more components. You can, for example, move this part to another part, and they still should communicate with each other. So how it's done? If I go to here, yeah, so this is the refresh on messages. Okay, and that's probably it about it. So you have a little event here, update search results, and it says that if something happening, then to some kind of event which is update search results. And basically this is also valid for these components as well. They also have the same message. And since they all have the same message, that's only for input change messages. If they have the same message, it means that if I do something which triggers a single event, then all components on the page, they're refreshed in the same manner. So if, for example, I clicked a facet, that will change something for this component. And probably that's it. It's more than that. You can always think about analytics, which is Sitecore always thinks about analytics. If you want to enable some analytics event like clicking something, you can always attach using the same sinse framework. You can also attach something to this button. I think that's it about the front end and the experience editor. Just a few words about development itself. Development with the Sitecore or with the Score is pretty similar to everything. And if we, for example, take a look here, layouts, renderings, Score something, Bootstrap UI, for example, content, buttons, everything. It's like, for example, image button. It's a view. It's a model. And if you want to change it, that's probably all of us did it a lot of times. And as far as I'm not sure I can share my solution. Yeah, no, I can't. Because just if you think about it, like I said, the solution has some predefined thing, like some environments which contains a lot of configuration for all possible environments, like int single, QA single, QA CM, and everything, which makes it easier for deployment. And they're using patches. Like I said, by default, it's not using anything like Glass Mapper, for example, but if you want to, no problems. So that's the idea of Score. If you want to work with Score, and you probably need to only learn how the thing is structured. Everything else is always about Sitecore, so it's the same thing. Just maybe a small example about like a real example. Few words. Procter & Gamble. There was a solution to build more than 100 websites for different products, like their Allspice, some other stuff. They offer a lot of products. And it took us for a few months to build a project that actually is a constructor for different websites. So basically that was something like this. Just imagine that was a single website. And using the PowerShell scripts and some packages, you could deploy a new website here with almost every content just in maybe 2 minutes. And your content editors are ready to work with it. And like I said, there are more than 100 websites like this. And if you look at them, they are totally different. Like one have carousels, one don't have, other don't have. Some have like images and well, layouts are totally different, but on the background, on the back end, they're absolutely same. Like all the structure is similar. Well, that's the thing about flexibility, Score, and Sitecore working together. So yeah, did I? Okay, I'm done.
What is the price? For Score?
Well, I expected that. It really depends. You can, for example, well, I will not tell you the exact amount of money, but you can always buy something like, a trial version with a full support and everything for a few months, or you can extend it month by month. But yeah, it's not sure, but it's not cheap. Like I said, buying a Score for building just a single website with a couple of pages, that's stupid.
What is the process involved in creating a new site? Imagine we have like a website